Points throughout the match, but Eala just kept coming at her.
Listen to the third round. Alexandra Eala.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Salamat.
Alexandra Eala, let's get some tennis balls.
Well, Andrew Krasny conducting the interview there. She's delighted. I'm not surprised. So many positives from that performance today.
A marathon match, and of course, Sigemund was playing those tactical games. You know, she was time wasting a little bit. She was, getting a little bit agitated. Getting the umpire involved. She does all those things, and Eala, mentally strong throughout, just kept her cool and just played the game. And that's what she did very, very well in this one, which could have easily gone to Sigemund. I mean, again, like I said, chances were there. But let me know in the comments below. How's Eala going to do against potentially Swiatek?
What if I told you the most important moment of this entire match had absolutely nothing to do with tennis? No stunning winner, no match-winning ace, no perfectly timed drop shot. Just a bench, a completely empty court, and a 20-year-old girl sitting utterly alone staring at a tunnel her opponent had just disappeared into. For 12 full minutes. After losing the first set. In the middle of a Miami Open second-round match that was supposed to be a statement win. Most players at that moment don't just lose their composure, they lose the entire match before they even walk back to the baseline. But Alex Eala didn't just hold it together. She did something that made every single person watching realize they were witnessing something far bigger than a tennis result. And by the time this video ends, you will understand exactly why those 12 silent minutes on that bench were more impressive than any forehand winner she hit all day. Still think this is just another second-round match? Keep watching because it gets much darker before it becomes extraordinary. Laura Siegemund is not the kind of player you prepare for by studying her backhand or her serve percentage. She is the kind of player you prepare for by studying your own mind because her entire game plan is built around dismantling yours. She is one of the most controversial rhythm breakers on the entire WTA Tour. She weaponizes time the way other players weaponize pace. Slow serves. Pauses between points that stretch far beyond what the rules allow. Umpire conversations about crowd movement that nobody else in the stadium can detect. Complaints about invisible distractions that somehow only affect her before crucial points. This approach has rattled veterans. It has derailed players with years of Grand Slam experience. It has turned matches that should have been straightforward into grinding, suffocating psychological battles where the better tennis player walks off court having lost. So when a 20-year-old from the Philippines steps onto a hard court in Miami against this specific opponent, the question everybody is quietly asking is the same: can she handle what is coming? Because here is the reality. Most players her age simply cannot. From the very first game, Eala answered that question in the most convincing way imaginable. She was sharp not just technically but mentally locked in at a level that immediately set this performance apart. She dictated rallies from the opening exchange. She moved Siegemund side to side with intelligent, purposeful shot selection. She attacked short balls with conviction and stayed aggressive even under pressure. The crowd in Miami could feel it from the very beginning. This was not a young player hoping to compete. This was a young player who had arrived to dominate, and who understood exactly what kind of match she had walked into. The disruptions started almost immediately. Extended service routines. Long pauses before every toss. Complaints to the umpire about a spectator somewhere in the upper stands moving at precisely the wrong moment. Every single time Eala started building momentum, Siegemund inserted a pause, a delay, a complaint, something to fracture the flow and reset the psychological temperature back to zero. And yet Eala kept winning games. She kept competing through every disruption like someone who had decided that whatever Siegemund threw at her would simply bounce off. For long stretches of that first set she looked completely untouchable. So how did she still lose it? The tiebreak. That is the answer. And the tiebreak is the cruelest format in tennis because it strips everything back to its most raw and exposed form. No margin for error. No chance to rebuild across a long game. Just a handful of points where the smallest psychological crack becomes a canyon. Siegemund had spent the entire first set not trying to win rallies, she had been spending it building that crack. Pause by pause. Delay by delay. By the time the tiebreak arrived, Eala was no longer fully playing on her own tempo. She was half playing on Siegemund's terms, and in a tiebreak, half is more than enough. The veteran stole it. First set to Siegemund. And that specific moment plants a seed of doubt so deep that most players spend the rest of the match trying to dig it out and never quite managing to. But before Eala even had time to process what had just happened, Siegemund requested a bathroom break. And she was gone for 12 full minutes. Can you already guess what she was actually trying to do? 12 minutes. Think about what that means in real terms. You sit down on your bench. You try to stay warm. You try to keep your focus intact. Your muscles are cooling. Your rhythm, already disrupted throughout the first set, is now completely frozen. The mental state you spent an entire set protecting is now sitting in the open air, slowly evaporating. For the vast majority of players on tour, that 1-2 minute wait after losing a tiebreak is effectively the match. Not on the scoreboard, but mentally and competitively it is finished before it resumes. They sit there and the silence does the work Siegemund no longer needs to do herself. They replay the stolen set. They stew in the frustration. They let it fester into something that poisons every shot they hit from that point forward. And here is what makes Eala genuinely different from almost every other 2-0-year-old in professional tennis right now. She did not do any of that. Not 1 second of it. When Siegemund finally walked back out of that tunnel, Eala was already standing at the baseline. Not sitting. Not slumped on her bench replaying the first set in her head. Standing. Ready. There was a stillness in her eyes that the cameras caught in the moment. Play was called the look of someone who had spent those 12 minutes not spiraling but deciding. A very clear, very deliberate decision about how the next 2 sets were going to go. And then she went out and proved it was not just a look. The second set was a masterclass not in elegant baseline tennis but in ruthless, intelligent, adaptive competition. She completely changed her approach. She moved forward, took the ball earlier, and cut off the time Siegemund needed to reset and restart her psychological games. She attacked the net with a confidence that made her opponent visibly uncomfortable. She stayed so locked into her own internal process that the delays, when they still came, seemed to pass over her like weather she had already checked the forecast for. Game by game she built pressure. Game by game, Siegemund found fewer answers. The second set ended 6-3 and it was not a scrappy, fortunate result. It was a statement with a message attached, and the message was simple. Whatever you were trying to do, it is not working anymore. But Siegemund did not walk into the third set and quietly accept defeat. That is not who she is. Facing the prospect of losing a match she had managed to take the first set of, she reached into the deepest part of her tactical arsenal. Drama. The third set opened with renewed complaints to the umpire. Spectators entering at the wrong moment. Distractions invisible to everyone except Siegemund. The exact same script that followers of the WTA Tour had already watched play out at the US Open against Coco Gauff. The same time violations, the same deliberate delays, the same umpire confrontations. And then came the tearful press conference after that match. The claims of being treated like a cheater. The attempts to rewrite the narrative and position herself as the victim. Gauff had already called it out, live on court. The crowd had already seen through it entirely. In Miami, the officials had clearly done their homework. They kept the match moving. They declined to be drawn into the theater, and they made it obvious they recognized exactly what was happening. And as for Eala, she watched all of it from behind eyes that had already decided, somewhere during those 12 minutes of silence, that none of this would ever reach her. The third set stretched past the 3-hour mark and became something beyond sport. It became a pure test of human endurance, mental, physical, emotional, everything. Long games. Multiple deuces coming and going without resolution. Siegemund stretching every second between points to its absolute limit, fighting for any sliver of psychological leverage in a match she could feel slipping away permanently. And Eala absorbed every single second of it. She waited like a predator who already knows how the story ends, patient, precise, completely unhurried. When breakpoint opportunities appeared, she took them without hesitation. When Siegemund pushed games to deuce, she simply reset and competed again with no visible frustration and no sign that the relentless grind was costing her anything at all. 6-3. Third set. Match to Eala. 3 hours and change. 2 dominant set wins built entirely after losing the first. A calculated 1-2 minute bathroom break that was designed as a weapon and instead became fuel for the player it was aimed at. And a psychological war against one of the most experienced mental game players on the entire tour, won comprehensively by a 2-0-year-old who simply refused to play along with any of it. When the final point landed, the roar that came out of Eala was not the sound of someone celebrating a win. It was roarer than that. It was the sound of someone releasing 3 hours of accumulated pressure, of swallowed frustration, of deliberate emotional restraint that had required every single ounce of discipline she possessed. On the other side of the net, Siegemund offered a handshake that was brief and cold and said everything her words never would. The quiet, bitter acknowledgement of someone who had deployed every tool she owned and found that none of them worked. The Miami crowd needed no announcer to explain what they had just witnessed. They already knew. This was not just a second-round victory. This was a declaration from a player who had just proven, under the most deliberately hostile conditions an opponent can legally manufacture, that her mental ceiling may be higher than anyone in women's tennis had yet fully understood. What makes this result genuinely historic is not the scoreline, it is the context. Eala did not simply survive Siegemund's tactics. She identified them, processed them during 12 minutes of silence that would have mentally finished most players her age, adapted her entire game plan between sets, and came back with answers the veteran had absolutely no response to. That is not a 2-0-year-old playing above her level on a lucky day. That is a future champion discovering exactly how good she is in the moments that actually count. The draw ahead gets harder. The potential matchups waiting are bigger, more powerful, and built on a completely different kind of threat. But after everything that unfolded across 3 extraordinary hours on that Miami hardcourt, does that worry you for her? Because based on what she just showed the entire WTA Tour, I genuinely believe it should worry her opponents far more than it worries her. So tell me, do you think Siegemund's tactics belong in professional tennis, or do they cross a line the tour needs to urgently address? And after this performance, where do you honestly see Alex Eala's ceiling? Drop your answer in the comments right now, and if this match deserved more attention than it got, share this video, because the Pinoy Dragon just sent a message to every single player left in this draw.